out here at day 3 of Browns training camp at the Greenbrier Resort. And Mary Kay, today the headline is hearing from Browns owners Jimmy and Dee Haslam, who had a lot to say about a lot of different topics. But let's start out with the big one that everyone wants to know about, the future of Cleveland Browns Stadium and what they had to say about that.
Well, first of all, there's no decision yet whatsoever on the stadium. Will it be a renovation? Will it be the dome in Brook Park? But I asked them, what do fans want? Because they said it's fan-driven, this whole entire decision. And Dee actually said that the fans seem to favor the dome in Brook Park. I think they're leaning that way as well. So we'll see where this whole thing goes. But they also said right now they do not have any hard deadline on their decision for one of those two options.
I thought that was interesting. Also, Dee Haslam, of course, made sure to clarify that there's no hard and specific methodology from those survey results and how they've heard about fans. So she did add that in at the end of that part of it. But also they said, I thought was interesting, they're not anticipating that either a renovation or a new stadium would necessarily have to go on the ballot. It didn't sound like leaning one way or the other versus paying for it themselves. It sounded like they were more about splitting the cost more than anything from what Jimmy Haslam said.
Yes, and they still do want to split the cost. They really don't want to pay for this whole thing themselves. That's really not the way it's usually done throughout the NFL. So big project, very complicated, and we are still in the thick of it.
We also had a chance to ask Jimmy Haslam about Nick Chubb, of course, as Mary Kay wrote yesterday, when we had a chance to watch Nick go through some of his running and rehab work. Jimmy Haslam was right in front of us and looked pretty pleased, but thought it was interesting. He seemed to temper expectations a little bit, which is what we've also heard from Kevin Stefanski so far.
Yes, he pointed out, of course, we all know that this was the second major knee reconstruction for Nick Chubb. And even though we watched him sprinting back and forth across the field yesterday, cutting through cones in agility drills with Jimmy looking on, everyone still probably needs to temper the enthusiasm and the excitement just a bit, because it will be hard for Nick Chubb to return to his old form. He is on a mission, though.
And another key point we hit on, Mary Kay, something you actually asked them last year as well that we brought back this year, their expectations for this team, because we know the Super Bowl aspirations that always have seemed to hang around them these last handful of years.
Right, and now, of course, they have their GM under contract. They've got their coach under a long-term contract. They've got their quarterback back healthy, Myles Garrett. So everything seems in place to do what they want to do, which is go to the Super Bowl, but they are not going there. They're not setting the bar that high. They are not drawing any kind of a line in the sand. They're trying to tell people, we do have expectations, but it's very, very hard to win in the NFL. But we know what those expectations are.
And we're going to talk a little bit about what we saw from Deshaun Watson on the field. But first, of course, the Haslams got asked a handful of different questions about their quarterback.
Yes, absolutely. One of the questions that I asked them was about the fact that Deshaun had somewhat of a negative press conference yesterday. It really wasn't what we expected from the tone-setting first presser for him of this training camp. And they said that's not indicative of his mindset. They think he's in a great place heading into the season. They see the ball coming out well. They're excited about what he has to offer, and they know he has huge expectations for himself.
So on the field, we got a glimpse, really good glimpse today. We actually were able to move around the field a little bit more based on where they were doing team activities and see some red zone 7-on-7. He made a handful of really nice plays there in my mind. There was the first pass he made in that period to Elijah Moore. He also had a nice one to David Njoku early on the second go-around.
Right, he threw a lot of touchdowns in that red zone period. Now, of course, it's practice. They're not in pads yet, but you really want to be scoring the football as early as you can in camp. It just gets everybody excited about it. And usually, like when I look back to last year, the secondary was way ahead in those red zone drills. So for the offense now to be matching them play for play is a good sign.
And looking ahead here, because the Browns are going to be off on Sunday, their first of 2 off days down here in West Virginia. But when we come back, we're at the next stage of that ramp up. The pads are going to be coming on Monday. And news from Kevin Stefanski this morning, because we've wondered how Deshaun Watson, how they're going to handle everything as he continues to rehab from that shoulder surgery. And right now, the plan is for him to throw on Monday when the pads come on.
I'm actually surprised that Deshaun Watson is throwing on back-to-back-to-back days. He's going to be in pads. He's going to be throwing in 11-on-11s. So he's not very limited at all. Now, he does have an off day tomorrow. Well, he'll have a chance to rest that arm, but he'll be right back at it on Monday in pads, in team drills. That bodes well for the opening.
All right, well, we'll have all the coverage from that as training camp wrap-up continues, plus everything Jimmy and Dee Haslam had to say. We got a chance to hear from rookie defensive tackle Michael Hall Jr. today over at cleveland.com/Browns.